All right, good morning. We're going to do a lesson on annelid worms. That's our first real new animal group for you guys since this quarantine began. So the annelid worms are a group of worms. They might seem pretty insignificant, but just in terms of their importance as we learn animals in a certain order, things begin to show up in these animals like a closed circulation, what's called segmentation, which we'll get to in a second in the lesson, and so on. So even though we might just think of them as being just earthworms or some of these other things, leeches is probably the most interesting to you guys that we'll learn about here in a few minutes. As far as learning things in order, like I just said, they're significant. So anyway, enjoy this lesson. Let's check it out. There's some good variety here. So the annelid worms, the group is called the phylum Annelida. Actually, not sure if you wanted, you guys who are kind of curious about such things, look up even what that word means, because I don't know off the top of my head. But I know who they are. They are the segmented worms, and they're not always as drab as an earthworm. So this guy here, the people call it a Christmas tree worm. This is a clam worm. So sometimes they have a lot of these fuzzy structures on them. Either way, their bodies are segmented. This guy might not look like it, but what he has is like an earthworm type body that's in a tube. And when he opens his mouth, this is the structure that you see come out. So pretty cool sea animal, coral reefs and so on. So one of the main characteristics, they are segmented. If you think of our spine, again, all these animals being compared to us, so that's how they decide what's complex and what's not. So that might remind you somewhat of a spine segmentation, but it means that the body's divided up in these repeating sections. And they have what's called a closed circulatory system, meaning their blood stays within a system of tubes, vessels, arteries, veins, capillaries, kind of like ours. They have a bunch of hearts, as many as 8 hearts inside these things, which, if you think about it for a moment, what does that tell you about the efficiency of their hearts, if you need that many of them to pump blood around such a small animal? So not real efficient hearts, but they do pump blood. And kind of a weird characteristic of these guys is they, like a few other worms, especially parasitic ones, they oftentimes have both male and female reproductive organs at the same time. It's called being hermaphroditic. And some of the flatworms have that, especially the ones that, like I said, are um, parasitic. Okay, so where do you find these guys? They're marine, they're freshwater, and they're terrestrial, so pretty much anywhere, as long as there's plenty of moisture. So very thin skinned, a little bit like a mollusk. Sometimes you might even confuse them with a mollusk because they're soft bodied nature, but they are segmented, unlike a mollusk. But they do need water because they would dry out pretty easily. You might see earthworms after a rain crawling out of the grass. Too much water, they'll literally drown. So when the soil starts to get saturated with water after a good rain, they'll come out and you see them on their sidewalks. And then sometimes they get caught out there when the sun comes out. Typical California, it'll rain and then the sun comes out in the afternoon and they're still out on the sidewalk and they turn into little crispy, crunchy things. So anyway, a lot of them are filter feeders. Here's that Christmas tree worm. He's a filter feeder. So when that mouth part comes out, water drifts by with plankton and so on. He catches those things. Some are predators. A clamworm, actually, his name's pretty literal because that's where you find them. Is they like to live inside of a clamshell, a living clamshell, and they have these pretty good chelicera, they call them, like mouth parts, like mandibles, and they'll give you a pretty good little bite if you were to reach in there with your finger or something. And they are predators. They'll actually grab things and eat them. And then we have some that are parasites, and there's a leech. Looks like somebody's toe or thumb or something like that. And we'll learn more about those guys soon here. All right, so we got the earthworm group. If you want to do a little homework, check out who this guy is, an old cartoon character. Um, I think you might even find him on Nickelodeon these days. I don't know. Anyway, the bristleworms and the fanworms belong to the same group because of those bristly things they have. They call them setae. So here's the fanworms, or the Christmas tree worms, living on a piece of coral. Here's a bristleworm, kind of self-explanatory, covered with all these little bristles. And then we have the leeches. We're going to watch a video on that, on how leeches are actually used in medicine after surgeries to help reduce swelling and clean out an area where there's some internal bleeding and so on. All right, so that's the annelid group. We're going to talk in a little bit about a little activity I want you guys to do, kind of a homemade lab. And don't worry, you don't have to go catch one, you don't have to cut one up, but we're actually going to make one. All right. So we'll talk to you about that very soon. All right.